trick question, two people are running side by side, one's a trained athlete, the other guy's an untrained person. The trained athlete's probably using less glycogen at the same speed. The other guy's untrained, he's probably exercising harder, and we know when you exercise harder, you use more glucose, more glycogen. The trained person is just running along happily next to the guy, and he's burning fats. If he's burning fats, by the time they get to the end of the race, the trained person's got more carbohydrate to kick in and run that last lap pretty hard, whereas the other guy's been using his glycogen the whole time, and he's kind of like pooped out. What else helps you use free fatty acids? Besides training and besides diet, has anybody ever read anything or heard about caffeine? Back in the 70s, there was a guy named Dave Costco who worked at Ball State, and they were looking at how can I use more fat as a fuel, because using fats as a fuel is good, and you don't have to use the carbohydrates. And they had athletes or subjects drinking coffee or taking caffeine capsules. But caffeine stimulates free fatty acids, triglyceride breakdown. So you would say, hey, if I drink coffee before and it's helping break down my triglycerides, maybe that'll help feed into all this Krebs cycle stuff, and I'll be at an advantage over the guy that doesn't drink coffee. And there's been, it's not as big an improvement as you might think, and plus when you're racing, you got to go pee because you just had a bunch of coffee. But it's another way you can, it's hypothesized to increase your free fatty acid use. Interesting. All right, lactate. We talked about lactate. Good, bad. Well, we know lactate concentration depends on the production and removal. So it's the balance, right? So your concentration in your blood is how much you're making and how much you're removing. And I think the picture, this is my blood lactate concentration, whatever it is how much am I removing and how much am I making. Right now, you guys are all at about 1 millimole per liter because you're making some and you're removing just the same. That's kind of a resting oxygen or a resting lactate concentration. The way I can increase this concentration is I either make more or I remove less. Either way, that's going to go up, right? So the concentration is the balance. How much am I making? How much am I removing? So this is the balance. And it says lactate production during exercise, NADH, pyruvate. Let's see, lactate production during exercise, NADH, pyruvate. It's not worded exactly right, but remember those NADHs came off from glycolysis, gave the H to pyruvate. Depending on the LDH enzyme I have, all that stuff is going to make lactate, right? So this is talking about lactate production. Something seems missing here. You guys know how lactate's made. That's just reminding us how lactate's made. We know that pH is affected by lactate because if I make more lactate, I'm more acidic. So pH, I don't want to screw around with my pH. I want that regulated, right? It's an important variable. I didn't set up my alarm here. 11:25 again. All right, so this is big picture. I'm looking at mitochondrial biochemical adaptations and pH. So if I've got more, you guys agree, this is, if you had to say one thing that happens with aerobic exercise, you say I'm going to increase my mitochondria. That's a good thing. If I increase mitochondria, I can do more free fatty acids. And again, that's all these carbons are going into the Krebs cycle. If I'm doing that, I don't need to stimulate PFK to do all the sugar, all the glycolysis stuff, right? So that's good. If I stimulate PFK less, right, means I'm making less pyruvate from this, that stuff. If I'm making less there, right, and I'm doing it also because I have an increased heart form of LDH. I don't have to make as much lactate because I've got a different enzyme. So if I'm doing less of this and making lactate, more mitochondria, it says here, I've got more uptake of pyruvate NADH. Big picture, I'm making less lactate and less hydrogen ions, so I'm maintaining my pH better. Putting this together, more mitochondria make me rely less on the carbohydrate metabolism. Carbohydrate metabolism is the stuff that's associated with lactate, so I can rely more on the fat metabolism. It maintains my pH. It's kind of saying, we said previously, I'm a better fat burner. Well, what good does that do? Well, it helps me maintain my pH because I'm not doing the carbohydrate stuff. And if I can maintain my blood pH, that's a good thing. I'm less acidic, maybe less fatigue. All right, good. So pH is maintained, and we said concentration is the balance, and how much you make, how much you remove. So that was production. I make less lactate. This is saying, well, you said lactate concentration is production and removal. Let's talk about removal. So back to the cardiac output. We said after training, my cardiac output changes, right? What happens to my cardiac output? It goes up, right? With training, I have a larger cardiac output. If I have, let's see if I can say this right. Check this out. If after training, if I have a better oxygen extraction, I can better extract the oxygen from the blood that's there in the muscle. I don't have to get as much blood there because I'm a better extractor. Does that make sense? If I send some blood down there and I can't extract very much, I better send a lot of blood so I can get the oxygen I need. But if I'm a good extractor, the blood that's there, I don't need as much blood because I can extract more of it. You guys got to tell me if you understand that. I've got more capillaries, I'm trained, I'm on the bike, I'm extracting a lot better, so I don't need as much blood to push pedals around to 2 kp. Whereas an untrained person needs more blood because they're not extracting as much. So if I'm a better extractor, I don't need as much blood flow, right? If I don't need as much blood flow to my muscles, I've got so much blood, I can send more to my liver, right? I can send more to my liver. My liver is going to extract it says here, increased lactate removal. So the liver is, again, I've got so much blood to circulate. When I'm untrained, I got to send it all to my muscles. When I'm trained, I can send less to my muscles. The rest of it can go to my liver. My liver can remove the lactate. I become a better lactate remover. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So two things are happening with training. I become less of a lactate producer and more of a lactate remover. And doing those things helps me maintain or decrease my lactate concentration. I hope that makes sense. It seems odd. Most people, I think, if you said, hey, before training, you get on the bike and you pedal 2 kp. We're going to measure your blood flow to your muscle. After training, we're going to do the same thing. Get you on the bike and ride you to 2 kp and measure the blood flow in your muscle. Most people would want to say, oh, you probably send more blood to your muscle after training because that would be a good thing. Well, you don't need to because you're a better oxygen extractor, so it actually is a reduced blood flow pedaling that 2 kp. That's different, and this goes back to that first question I asked you guys about what happens with heart rate and exercise. What I just described, pedaling at 2 kp before and after training is less blood flow because you're a better extractor. With maximal exercise, tell me if you guys believe this. I'm untrained. I get on the treadmill and I do this VO2 max test. And you get me all the way to the top, and right before I fall off, or as I fall off, you guys get my blood lactate concentration, and you go, holy cow, it's up there, man. It's like 10. Then I train for 20 weeks. Now I'm this aerobic mitochondrial guy. I'm just aerobic. I do the treadmill test again. What do you think would happen at max? What would my lactate be? Would it be less? Would it be the same? Would it be more? I trained. Now I'm just like, I went from Gary Brodowitz the slug to now Gary Brodowitz the aerobic Evan Jager guy. My lactate was pretty high when I was untrained. I did the max test. Now I'm going to be trained, and you're going to max test me. I want to know what you think would happen to my maximal lactate concentration. You got 3 choices. It could be nothing changes, it goes up, or it goes down, and why?
Wasn't it lower?
Why?
Because you're not making as much lactate. You're going through the process.
So lower.
Because you're burning. No.
Okay, what you're describing is, because I want you guys to think about this. This is that thing where I said, what happens to your heart rate with exercise? Yeah, you said, what do you mean by heart rate? What do you mean by exercise? So I just described before 2 kp on the bike. Trained and untrained, they're riding at the same absolute work level. The trained person makes less lactate, has a lower concentration. They're better. Now I'm talking about a maximal test. So I'm untrained. Let's say I got to stage 4 before I fell off. So I got to stage 4, my lactate was 10. Now watch this. Now I'm trained. Can I go past stage 4? Yeah, I can go to stage 6 or 7. So I can go a lot further. Plus, I've been training for 20 weeks. I'm used to this lactate. I'm even like perceptually, I can handle lactate. Now I'm motivated. Before I was untrained, it's like, lactate, I hurt. Now it's like, lactate, who cares? I do this all the time. I do a couple extra stages on the treadmill. My lactate concentration would be higher after training. That seems weird because lactate's bad. You would think, well, at a maximal level, it's higher because I'm doing more. Before I was untrained, I recruited 10 motor units on each side. Now I'm trained, I'm recruiting 30 motor units on each side. I've got more ability to make lactate, and I can tolerate lactate, so it's almost like a counterintuitive thing. But at maximal, when you do stage 7 on a treadmill versus 4, you're recruiting a lot more muscle, and you're making all that stuff go. So it's just counterintuitive. It's making you guys remember that when we talk about exercise, it's either the same submaximal load, or if it's maximal, that's a different thing. It's a different animal when you talk about max.
And
No, you go ahead.
So if it wasn't a max test, would I be right?
Yeah, like describe
Would maybe,
like two people running on the treadmill at the same speed or something.
No, I was thinking more like you're not using like glycolysis. You're using more fat burn, so you wouldn't be making, or your lactate would be lower.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if we did this, if we said lactic acid concentration, and we said this is increased exercise intensity, the untrained person is going to do that. We said that's the lactate threshold. Trained person is going to do that, or maybe even, I guess it could even be like this. You know, we said that the anaerobic threshold, the lactate threshold is shifted, and I would bet at, again, this is maximals over here, but at each stage, their concentration is probably a little bit lower.
Yeah,
That's what I would think. And that would be good, because if you said, you say, hey, your lactate concentration is lower, and then the athlete says, that sounds good. Sounds like it's not affecting my pH so much. That doesn't feel like it's as hard. Yeah, that's good.
And is the liver able to process or remove the lactate pretty
Yeah, I think
quickly?
that would probably be part of the reason for the lower concentration is, these two people are on the treadmill doing the same stuff, side by side.
So it's almost simultaneous.
Yeah, well, one's trained, and you would go, well, the trained guy's running at the same speed, but he's making less lactate because he's a better fat burner, and at the same speed and grade, he doesn't have to send as much blood flow to his muscles because he's a better extractor, so he can send the blood flow to his liver to remove more of it. So it's like, this guy's, he's at an advantage. And it's all affecting his pH, it's all affecting his glycogen sparing, it's affecting his fat utilization, which is good. Okay. This is important, and this is important, and it's kind of, I don't know how hard this will be to think about, but it says the link between muscle and systemic physiology. So here's what I want you guys to think about. I trained for 20 weeks. Did I train my cardiovascular system? Did I train my respiratory system? Or is it the fact that my muscles got trained and sort of made things change? They're making an argument that it's the muscles that are trained, and therefore it has an effect on why your heart rate decreases or why your respiration decreases. So think about muscle. This is saying all the biochemical adaptations and training, more mitochondria, more enzymes, more all that stuff, right? I'm now trained. My leg muscles are trained. I've got less sympathetic nervous system activation because I'm trained. After training, there's less of a sympathetic response. Sympathetic meaning, think of it as being a stress. There's less stress, right? Because epinephrine, norepinephrine are stress hormones. So after training, I got less of that stuff going on, right? My epinephrine levels in my blood, my norepinephrine levels in my blood be lower. After training, I have a lower heart rate and lower ventilation. We said, yeah, after training, this is what happens. So they said, okay, let's talk about this. They said it's due to reduction of feedback from the muscle chemoreceptors. So after training, you guys agree that my muscles are at a certain level of exercise, they're going, this isn't so bad. The pH isn't as low as it was. The PCO2 isn't so bad. All this stuff that was happening before training is less disrupted, so there's less feedback. The muscles are saying, oh, we're fine. Our pH isn't as low, for example, right? You guys agree to that? The muscles are less perturbed after training because they're doing stuff more oxidatively, and so if there's less perturbation, there's less feedback coming to my cardiorespiratory control centers saying breathe harder or beat faster. So that's one thing. There's less feedback because my muscles are. And then this one says reduce number of motor units. So you go, all right, look, I'm on the bike. Before training, I got to recruit 10 motor units on each leg. Right? Just for a number, 10. After training, my muscles are stronger. I'm trained. Why, if I want to push the pedals around at 2 kp, do I need to recruit 10 and 10? Now I'm fitter. Why don't I just recruit 5 and 5? I can do that. My muscle fibers are trained. So if I recruit fewer motor units, because now I'm trained, I can do more with my motor units I have. Remember this? Remember we said there was something called central command, and I called it feed forward, where your brain says, hey, recruit some motor units to go exercise. And you recruit motor units. And your respiratory control center, your cardiovascular control centers are here. So me just recruiting motor units makes this stuff, my heart rate go faster, my respiration go faster. And then my muscles are doing stuff. Here's my muscles doing the work. They're sending signals going, feedback, right? That's what this is talking about. This is saying, I have to recruit some motor units to do the work, and some of that information spills over to increase my heart rate and respiration. I'm doing the work, and whatever's happening down here, the feedback is going to affect it. So it's those two things. I've got reduced feedback because my muscles are in better shape. Less or fewer motor units is talking about if I don't have to recruit as many motor units, there's less of a signal here. And there, the next slide shows this one-leg training study. So they're talking about, I'm going to just train one leg. So I got this, I'm a person with 2 legs. I can train one leg. One will be trained, one will be untrained. And here's kind of their setup. They're going to have people measure their heart rate, their lactic acid, ventilation, epinephrine, norepinephrine. So we got norepinephrine, we got epinephrine, lactate, ventilation, heart rate. Up arrows mean things go up, right? So each of these variables, what they did is they said, let's train one leg for 13 sessions. So here's a leg, and you can see over the course of 13 sessions, the norepinephrine level, when they tested it, went down, epinephrine went down, heart rate went down, lactic acid went down. So they're just training that one leg, and they're saying, hey, look, all these good things are happening when we test you by using that leg and measure all those things. And then they said, all right, this leg is trained. Now let's use the other leg. So they train the other leg. This is the other leg. Here, look at what happens here. I trained this right leg, and when you tested me, I got all these good things happening. Epinephrine's lower, lactate. But when you did my left leg, here I was supposedly trained for 13 days. So you would think it was my cardiovascular system or my hormonal system was trained, but when I used my other leg, it wasn't. It was almost like I hadn't done any training at all. That's what that message is. It's like when I train this leg, things happen that are good, but then when I test this leg, after I'm trained, you would think that my heart rate and lactate and all that stuff would be lower. It was as if I wasn't trained. So they're saying, it must be something to do with the muscle. So when they train that left leg or the other leg, then they got the adaptations in norepinephrine, lactate, ventilation, heart rate. So they're trying to say there's a link between how trained the muscle is and what's happening to your heart rate. It's not like you have this thing called the cardiovascular system that just gets trained. It's like they're saying it's the muscle that affects why you have a lower heart rate kind of thing. I mean, your heart gets bigger, right, with endurance training, so it's not like nothing happens to your heart, but they're saying there's a link between muscle training and the arrow says no transfer effective training. I trained this leg, but it didn't transfer to the other leg. I don't know if we'll get to muscle. We will get to muscle, but when you train with muscle, resistance training, if you train this arm, there is a transfer to this arm. So I can train this arm. Well, I can do a 1 rep max. Right? I'm trained. I can do 80 pounds, 80 pounds. Then I train this one, man. Now I can do 120 pounds. I can do 90 or there's a transfer. So in aerobic type training, there isn't a transfer from one leg to one side to the other, but in resistance training, there appears to be some transfer of training. Let me see how many I got here. Okay. Ooh, it's going to beep in about a minute and a half. This covers what we just talked about. I've got my motor cortex, the stuff that says, hey, I want to recruit a bunch of motor units, and by recruiting a bunch of motor units, I'm going to increase my oxygen uptake. Part of that signal gets thrown over to my cardiorespiratory control center. Again, this is the stuff coming down. It says, I wanted to recruit those motor units to do this, but some of the information spilled over to this that made my work rate, heart rate, my ventilation, all that stuff change. So this is just saying it's the feed forward stuff. It's the stuff coming down. Recruiting the motor units is affecting my cardiorespiratory control centers. Let me ask you this question. This got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pluses here. This is saying somehow I want to do something, and I got 5 pluses here. If I train and I only need 3 pluses here, wouldn't you think that would be less stimulation of this and less heart rate ventilation stimulation? I mean, my heart rate would go up less because I'm recruiting fewer motor units, so I wouldn't have to have my ventilation and heart rate go up as much. So I guess another way to think of this is you can take those pluses, and if there's 5 pluses, it means you're untrained. If there's 3 pluses or 2 pluses, maybe that's the effect of training. You don't need to recruit so many motor units. Fewer motor units doesn't stimulate your cardiorespiratory control center as much. You got stronger muscles. All right, I got 11. I said 11:25. I got 5 minutes. This will be easy because so the book does this. It says, hey, let's talk about training, and they say aerobic training, stroke volume, VO2 max, all that stuff, and then they say, hey, let's talk a little bit about strength training. So you guys know that when you strength train, you increase your muscle size. And you say, well, yeah, I increased my muscle size. And if you ranked everybody at Portland State, and I said, I'm going to give you $1 million to the person who can rank everybody from the strongest to the weakest, you'd probably line people up according to you got the biggest muscles and you got the smallest muscles, and you hope it works. You know, it doesn't always work that way, but that's muscle size is the more muscle you have, the stronger you're going to be, right? So we know this is true. The muscle size gets increased in training. This is basically saying there's a neural factor. So let's say I'm untrained. I've never lifted weights before. As soon as I lift weights, within a week, right, I get stronger in the bench press. I don't get any increased muscle size. So if my muscles aren't growing and I'm not getting more actin and myosin and all that stuff, then how did I bench press 100 on the first day of training and 120 the second day and 125 the third day? There's got to be some neural component. So that's what this is saying. There's a neural component to the increases you make in your strength. And that's usually early on. And then muscle enlargement, we know that my muscle gets bigger, and we said, do I get more muscles, hypertrophy, or is it hyperplasia, the number? 99%, most people say most of it is hypertrophy. So you think of strength training, you say, well, there's a neural aspect, and there's sort of a structural, muscular enlargement aspect. Okay? And so the picture you see in every exercise phys book is, they say, let's look at your strength. I'm going to increase my strength. Okay, that's what happened. And they say, well, early on, it was the neural part, that I could recruit more motor units. Somehow I had less inhibition of contractile units. I got better coordinated at lifting the weights. There's something neural. And then the slower course is getting actin and myosin, getting the fibers bigger. So, it kind of makes sense. You can do neural things faster than you can structural size. It takes a while for your muscles to get bigger. And so that's pretty much all they do. What I want you guys to appreciate is there's a section in our chapter where they talk about, they do all this aerobic stuff. And then they talk about let's see if I can say this right. I don't cover this in class. They talk about the cellular signals that what are the cellular signals? What's all the pathways for you to get more mitochondria and be more aerobic? And there's a pathway for that. And then they cover strength training and they say, what are the cellular signals, like way deep in the cascade of signals that make your muscles stronger? There's a different pathway for that. So there's like two different pathways that, and when you get into an advanced exercise phys class, they talk about two different pathways, one for aerobic training, one for strength training, and you can almost go, yeah, it kind of makes sense. You're training aerobically, you should do things aerobically, you train strength. Well, there's work that's asking the question, what happens if you do both? What happens if you do this and then add this, or do this and like does aerobic training interfere with strength training? And there are two different pathways, and there's some evidence to indicate that two types of training interfere with one another. So if you want to be a better strength person, you do strength training and develop that set of pathways. And if you're aerobic, you want to do aerobic. I didn't read this ahead of time. 1 minute. Percent of strength, leg extension. What happens when you train? What am I doing here? Looks like when you train, you get a good increase. When you detrain, you get a decrease, and then when you retrain, you get an increase. I don't know what this is. I know it's in the book, but I didn't reread it. To me, it's looking at detraining, and you lose strength. Don't want to cover this. If early on we said when we talk about muscle fiber type, and does muscle fiber type change with training? What did we say happens with aerobic training and resistance training? What kind of a shift is there?
Fast to slow.
Fast to slow shift. What they say in the book is when you do aerobic training, you really get a fast to slow, so you get more type 1s, right? When you do strength training, you still get a fast to slow, but instead of getting type 1s, you go like from 2Xs to 2As, kind of like the very fast to the intermediate. So it's still a fast to slow shift. That's what our textbook says. So here's the plan. Tomorrow at 9:15, you don't need a big breakfast, whatever. Do whatever you do. We'll get the system set up. We'll do a VO2 max test. It'll be pretty brief, I think, if we do it right. Maybe we'll do 3 of them. And then I may bring my computer to cover some body composition stuff, and then I'll let you guys go. And then we have the exam on Thursday. I'm looking at 35 questions again. You guys will have 2 hours, but you won't need 2 hours. So depending on how you feel relaxed, you can stay for the 2 hours. And then all you have to do is send me the lab email-wise, the write-up within a week, I guess. Does that make sense?
Is that going to be soon enough for you to get the grades up?
I'm just going to randomly assign grades anyways.
That's
No, it should be enough time. Yeah. So again, what you guys have to do before Thursday, if you want, is if you've got questions, you got to write them down and ask me, because that'll be the safest way to go. I can at least address what you might not know. We good to go? How do you think those other two